All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another trade recap. Today was a pretty decent day in the market, so let's get straight into it. Starting here on our higher time frame as usual. On the 4 hour, really wasn't much to see for me personally. What I saw was we had this low from Tuesday. I have it marked out as previous day low. I forgot to change the labeling for this, so it was just a daily candle low that I had marked out. And you can see here marked out we had an SMT with ES there in the pre-market. So going to the hourly where things were a bit more clear to me. Here you can see that SMT. And then as you see here, I have fib levels marked out. So I have the bottom of this range to the top of the range marked out. And you can ultimately see here, we've been just kind of chopping around, consolidating. And, we have this huge range to kind of make up. And, we had equilibrium here, which you could see we used, kind of came up and chopped around from. And then we had this golden pocket level where we actually used and kind of made a nice push up here to the top of the range. And then we had our, this final level down here, which is the 0.705 level where I would expect some form of a reaction at this final point. And this also kind of aligns where the CE of our new week opening gap is as well. Other levels that I had, if I'm anticipating bearishness, basically have, these data lows where I'm anticipating, this huge rally up to be what I would call like a Trump data low. So we have that here sitting with the weekly open. Ultimately, we'll probably draw down here as our weekly objective, in my opinion. Probably, sell off this rally, take out some of these lows, and then, maybe come back up into the range. But anyway, let's get more into what I saw for today. So we can see London highs above here, and we can see Asia. So Asia highs came off of previous day's equilibrium, and I haven't really been entertaining overnight price action much. I did trade some top steps last night. Just took a really quick scalp long on 5 minutes to have past those. But nothing like, truly structural in terms of like a trading setup. But anyway, so Asia here we can see came up into previous day's equilibrium. Now, the hourly does look super, super nasty up here. But one thing to point out is this SMT here at the top, and then seeing us start to, reject this area and, grind lower. So having Asia here, we can see previous day equilibrium, we come up wicked perfectly, and then we end up, seeing price start to grind lower. Now, previous day low was, clearly the draw of this move. So once I saw that we, were below previous day low coming into the open, I expected, maybe a retrace back into the range. Wasn't really expecting us to push up into London, which we did not end up doing, but expected us to at least come back and, rebalance some of the range. So that was kind of what I saw from the hourly time frame. Now scaling down to the 15-minute, and this is my trade bracket here, which I'm going to leave for later purposes. But coming down to the 15 here, pre-market, really wasn't much to see. At this point here, I'm anticipating, maybe we start to use this area to come up. We can see we have the external SMT with that daily candle low that I mentioned, and then we have this internal SMT here now. But other than that, didn't really see much. I had this 15-minute gap marked out as a condition coming into the open. Basically, if we were to start trading above this 15 or inverse this off the open, I would then frame ideas for long into these internal highs, or into this unfilled 15-minute that's in a premium area. So basically, premium area meaning, an area where we could start to short again from. So you can see here when we take our fib levels from this high down to the low at this point, right? We have the golden pocket sitting pretty much at the entry of that 15-minute gap that's unfilled above here. So it can make sense for price to push up, take out these highs, rebalance into this 15-minute, and then proceed to come lower. So I'll talk more about that later because price did end up, playing that out. But sorry, I got in a text message, but let's continue. So going further here, we'll go down to the 5-minute and we'll just start playing into our market open. So 5-minute wasn't really looking for much, was really just looking to see, what would happen if we come up into this 15. Are we going to flip? Are we going to hold it bearish? What are we going to do? So really at this point, wanting to just see longs because I'm wanting to see us rebalance, this move down that we had during, all of London and, towards the end of Asia. So let's go ahead and play out price, going closer into the open here. So here's 925. So at this point here, we're inside of the 15 minute. Here is 925. And at this point, I'm kind of anticipating that, okay, we're probably going to start running up here and, pushing for this high. So that's kind of what I was anticipating at this point in time. So let's go ahead and play out into the market open. So market open, this is the candle that we get. So upon seeing this candle, I'm like, okay, we could, potentially want to come down, resweep one more time, maybe make an SMT there again. We'll kind of see what price ends up wanting to do, or, maybe we're going to end up holding this 15 minute and ultimately just delivering down into these draws. And, for me, once these draws were taken, if, shorts were the play for today, once these draws were taken, I probably wouldn't have been looking to take anything else unless we were just super strong towards these next, key levels down here. So at this point here, just waiting and, wanting to see what price wants to do. Do we want to resweep? So that's your opening candle. So boom, we come here, open up a gap. And at this point here, it's starting to look like we could potentially push down. Now, personally, I was super, set on the idea of us coming up to rebalance this range. I liked all of these, low resistance highs we had on the lower time frame. So I really didn't want to entertain any ideas short. And the other thing as well was that I just didn't have a good, risk to reward to take on a proper continuation entry from here. So I, simply faded it. Now, another thing that I want to mention for today as well are these standard deviation levels. I'm not going to go into full, coverage of, exactly how I utilize them, but, I just use them in my trading for extra conviction. So today I saw, obviously pre-market, we had this little kind of, manipulation up through, into these highs and, inside of this 15 minute. So I took the standard deviation of this little move. And, essentially, if this is going to be manipulation, I want to see, -2 to -2.5 align with, a key area, which would be this drawn liquidity here being the pre-market lows. So we had that. I did measure out fibs, and I was expecting, okay, if we wanted to, use fibs to come up, this candle would start that move up. And ultimately, we didn't start to move up from around this 0.79 area. So the next thing to see is, okay, do we want to come sweep and, use these projections to then move higher? So let's play price out a little bit more here. So we start kind of looking like we're going to come up. And I told my live today that if we did get, a strong push up from this area, this retrace, a strong move up through this gap, I would definitely take a long and look to target this internal high here. But at this point here in price, we're just waiting until we get, strong volume through that gap. So we come up here. I'm starting to kind of look to potentially frame longs. We're still holding, this area, this imbalance here, right? Still holding weak, and then boom, right? So we come and we sweep out this low. Now, this tapped -2.5 perfectly. We ended up sweeping this low, sweeping the low perfectly. And now we do have, some kind of engineered internal levels now to target, right? We have these engineered, internal highs here. And then we have these relative equal highs up here, which, ultimately is a good target. Now, at the same time, we end up having SMT at this low with ES, and we still have the SMT at that daily candle low that we mentioned pre-market, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pull over my other screen because I actually took a 15-second entry today. And the reason I took the 15-second entry is because the 1 minute didn't really have like clear enough structure for me to take a long. So instead I took a 15-second, which had cleaner structure to take. And again, if you know, price is fractal. So whatever happens on the 1 minute, you can align down to the lower time frame, such as a 15-second. But you just have to use, clear discretion. So it definitely will take some time. So let's go ahead and cover that here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my trade evade over. So I took these on some alpha evals. Didn't really size heavy at all. Kind of just taking things slow for this month, really, across accounts. Obviously, conditions have not been the best. And I don't typically trade overnight or trade like gold. So I don't take advantage of overnight moves. And I might start getting into it, but I'll need to collect a little more data. So we're just kind of de-risked for the rest of this month. Hopefully going into Q2, we start to see a little bit more out of price. But anyway, let's get into the 15-second entry. So going here to the 15-second time frame. And boom. All right. So the entry I took, we covered, right? We came down, souped out that low, right? And on the 15-second, right, like I said, you can fractalize price. So at the same time here, we also are making a mini AMD, right? We have this slight mini range on the 15-second. We come down, manipulate, and leave, this imbalance behind, right? So essentially what I'm waiting for is for us to flip this gap. And also, for bonus, would like for us to make this CISD here as well. So you can see at the entry I took, we got a nice close above that gap, nice strong close above that gap. And I took entry pretty much the next candle after. Initially, I wanted the CISD, but this close was pretty strong, so I was pretty confident we're going to end up getting it. And then you have clear area to break even in these smooth edge highs here. As you can see, we got pretty clear displacement up towards those, smooth edge highs. Clear displacement candles up. At this point here, worth my entry. Go and break even just makes sense. We shouldn't come down to revisit. And then I'm targeting these, relative equal highs up here, basically high of day. I took TP a little bit higher up. Initially was going to hold for those 202 draws that you guys can see marked out here. But ultimately just wanted to take the low-hanging fruit because of the market that we've been having. We could have very well came up here, taken these highs and then dump back into the range, breaking me even. So this was the entry on the 15. I don't typically use the 15-second, but when you look at the charts for long enough and you put the hours in on the charts, you will start to see like these patterns form. So if I go on the 1 minute and I go ahead and play that out, or actually we can just go to the 1 minute here. So if we go to the 1 minute and we look at that entry, right, it's not very clear at all, right? You could definitely have still gotten a solid entry by taking this close, making the CISD and breaker right here, and still gotten a nice, flush up into the, towards buy side at 202, which we ultimately ended up taking. Or, you could have waited for this candle here as well to close this 930 gap, which was still a valid idea, and taken this up into 202 as well. I personally just like the idea of this trade for better risk to reward. And also the market has not been the greatest for continuations like this right here as of recent. So reversals have been more of the play, using rejection areas and things like that, which typically I was not using before, but I always had within my skill set. So it's good to at least have that now. But yeah, that pretty much covers, the market for today. Now, getting into what I brought up earlier about that 15-minute setup and how I mentioned about the ranges. So coming out of replay mode, let's go ahead and clear up some things here. All right. So clear up this high. We know we came up and took this high, right? Now, I mentioned this 15-minute unfilled gap here. I mentioned that it was in a premium area that we could use to end up coming back down in price. Again, if we take our fibs and we go ahead and we put them down, right, we made a new low. So at this point here, this is the low we have now used for our fib. And you can see we come up into 0.705 and into this 15-minute gap and see hard rejection multiple times, right? Now, we end up making an SMT here, as you can see marked out by the indicator. We end up making this SMT with ES, and you could very well have found a move short out of here. So for me personally, if I'm going to have taken a short, realistically, this was not the cleanest, and as well as, we made this huge move up already. For me, I probably would have waited until seeing some clear displacement. We end up making this SMT here and make a strong wick down. A safe entry to take at that point would have been something like this. And personally, I would have had, a relatively tight stop, just targeting back down to low of day. And as you can see, NWOG consequent encroachment, or CE midpoint, whatever you want to call it, was pretty aligned, relative equal lows, with this low of day. This would be a solid trade to take risk to reward wise. You have a pretty tight stop. You're getting about a 3R. This would have been solid to take out of this chop. And the reason why this is good is because we're chopping up here, chopping up. We make a strong candle up here, right? Strong, like, manipulation move up. Make an SMT with ES again. Get a strong push back down, right? Clear displacement candles right after. And then, you can run a tight stop and play this trade out. Go, break even at, this unfilled imbalance, unfilled areas in price. Alternatively, you can go break even once we tap into, discounted areas. So, golden pocket here at 0.618, sorry. Obviously, that's like a relatively tight break even. But again, you're running a tight stop. And if this is going to be valid, we should just start flying down. Or you could use some of the other fib levels as well. But this is a pretty clean trade. Back down into low of day. Coming out of that 15-minute aligned with these fibs. For me, using these fibs, honestly, and seeing price, what I would have done is, if I'm seeing this candle here close the way it closed, for me personally, I wouldn't mind taking the entry off the fib, um, and taking some kind of a limit order. So, what I would do is probably end up limiting, CE of this wick, using it as a rejection wick out of this 15, because you could see we wicked it ever so slightly here. And then what I would do is I would just put my stop just above the 15, right above this next fib, in order to protect it, right? It's a 30-point stop. And then you could just come back and target, the range low of day, and pretty much back into that NWOG CE. So let me go ahead and clear some things up here so it looks more clear. But yeah, essentially something like this. So, if price is actually going to hold these areas, we should hold this 15-minute gap aligned with these fibs and then be able to see a move down. And then, obviously with a trade like this, it kind of varies on whether or not you would have got hit break even. Maybe you want just, a fat flush down before moving break even and trailing, or maybe you went break even after this move and got stopped out. But either way, this wouldn't have been a loser. This would have been a break even at most. And then you would have been able to get a potential re-entry, after we started to see some more volume come into the market. But yeah, I mean, those are pretty much the two moves that I saw. Ultimately, the market's been giving out kind of just one clear move in AM and then kind of chopping around for the most part, where, this was kind of our clear move, right? We opened, got our manipulation down, and then a nice, model to buy back up into the range. And then we kind of did chop around and then ultimately delivered sell side. Not as clean as we delivered here, but we ultimately still delivered. But yeah, I mean, that covers the trade recap for today. I think today was relatively clean. You guys are going to see that I'm using more fib levels and standard deviation projections in my trading, just because price has been super kind of range bound, obviously, on the higher time frame. You guys have noticed this. So using these levels, allows you to kind of ping pong price as price is, kind of reactive to these fib levels and standard deviations. I've kind of been back testing it a bit through FX replay, just here and there, putting in a little bit of time into studying some of these levels. And we'll notice a lot of time that price does react to fibs and standard deviations, especially when we're in range bound conditions, just because, we're delivering, simply delivering just up and down in, either huge or smaller ranges, but we're not, having fat expansion where it's like, okay, boom, we're coming up into London, Asia. We're having very light expansion moves where it's like, okay, we're coming up into internal levels, right, into fibs, right, getting retraces and then coming back down towards the range lows and, repeating. So these markets have been relatively hard to adapt to, but, as a trader, your job is to adapt. Overall, I would recommend being more prone to playing reversals in these markets, having higher RR. You can run tighter stops and, basically be able to mitigate risk more that way, risking light. And if a trade plays out, higher RR, you're going to be, banking pretty nice. But that's just a little bit of my recommendation. But yeah, I called out the longs today for my live. We go live every single morning, Monday through Friday at 9 in the morning. I called out to the live today that I wanted to see longs. And I said, okay, boom, we could come up in versus 15, or we could hold this 15, come lower, in which I would be seeing if we, come sweep out lows, retrace into fibs, and see a reaction, right? That's exactly what it came down, saw a reaction. Once we came up, I went on the second chart. I called out to the chat that the 15-second inversion didn't look too bad. Pretty light risk. It was only a 36-point stop, right, around a 70-point TP. So, almost a 2R basically. So very much worth. And in these ranges, it's super clean just to play from bottom of the range back to the top of the range, right? You guys have seen that happen repeatedly for the last couple of months now. So, yeah, pretty clean. Every day we're calling the market, giving commentary, analysis, and also calling out trades in real time. Today, the chat absolutely banked with us. We all rolled these longs up. Some people rolled these longs up even past these highs into the 202 level that I originally wanted to see, just up here. So yeah, everyone banked. If you guys want more information about the lives, you guys can let me know down in the comments below. And I'll leave links to it as well in the description. But yeah, that covers the video for today, guys. Hopefully you guys can gain some value from this, as always. And if there's anything else you guys want to see in the future, do be sure to leave that below, and I'll take it into consideration. But that covers the video. Take it easy, guys. Later.